So in this video, I will be giving an overview of the whole assignment, and in the next video, I'll go in more depth for the formative piece that you'll be submitting first. So first thing you're going to do after you open the curriculum-based assessment, the CBA template, is you will not be able to have editing privileges. Your copy will be view only. So you want to make a copy. And then you can put your name and your partner's name here and save it to your drive. So you can save it wherever you want in your Google Drive. And then you want to share it after you're done working on it. You can also put in my name, which is Fitts, S-S-F-I-T-T-S-S is my App State email, and you're going to share it with me. And just make sure that when you share it with me that you allow for me to edit. You could put comment, but if you could put edit, that'd be great. And then you can push send if you want, and you can notify me if you want, but either way, provide me with access to your document. So here you're obviously going to put your name and your partner's name, put down what topic and subject and grade level that you'll be working with. Part 1 is just identifying the curriculum standard that you want to work with. So you're going to go to the North Carolina Standard Course of Study. So in the first part, you're going to select a standard that you want to work with, and you may want to select a standard that you are a little bit familiar with or that you're interested in learning more about, because you will need to spend some time with it, deconstruct it, and the focus of this assignment, like it sounds, is creating assessments, curriculum-based assessments that will appropriately address the standard and the learning targets that you identify. So for my example, I'm going to be looking at 4th grade science. So I would go to the NCDPI website, and I'm going to be looking at the Science Standard Course of Study. You'll notice that on the NCDPI website, they have a variety of resources, and those will help you identify your learning targets. So do check them out, especially if your area has the Unpacking standards. You definitely want to look at them. So you can see there's the essential standards for science, and then the Unpacking standards really help you identify the learning targets of the essential standards. So I'm going to be looking at 4th grade, and I'm going to be looking at forces and motion. So I would take my standard and my clarifying objectives, and I'm going to copy and paste them right there. And so I would just copy them and paste them, and they may need a little bit of formatting as well after that. And just going to take and you can format it. Obviously take out the highlighting and the bolding and what have you. So you're going to put your standard and your clarifying objectives here. Your subject and your grade level. So my subject is science, and it's 4th grade. And then here you're going to be identifying the type of standard and objectives that you're working with, and label them as knowledge, reasoning, skill, or product, and provide a short explanation of how you labeled them that way. So chapters 3 and 4 will help you out with this, but in chapter 3, in the section that is called Deconstructing Content Standards, it's on page 60 all the way through 68. In that section, it will help you with determining your target type. So, my overall standard, explain how various forces affect the motion of an object. So explanation, for students to be able to construct an explanation, some of this is going to be knowledge, but it's going to be reasoning as well, because students have to be able to connect knowledge of how magnets behave to, larger scientific concepts and to observations that they have made. And so explaining is going to be more than just recalling information. So that's probably going to be a reasoning type of a target. Those are probably reasoning targets. And so that would be, my rationale for why I labeled them. At this point, we're looking at these broad standards and clarifying objectives. We're going to break them down further as we go along. So that's part one. So part number two is analyzing the essential content and learning for your standard and objectives. So here you're going to look at these standard and objectives that you have selected above, and you're going to unpack that chart. And again, the material in our text on pages 60 through 68 are going to help you out with that. So I'm going to repaste my standard here, and I'm going to label which parts are knowledge, which are reasoning, which are skill, and which are product. So for example, if I need to explain how magnets interact with all things made of iron and with other magnets to produce motion without touching them. So on the knowledge side, students would need to know what is attracted to a magnet, what's repelled by a magnet. On the reasoning side, students might have to explain or compare the force field of different magnets, or explain how do magnets attract things like through non-magnetic things. To help you with unpacking these, it's important to look at these unpacking standards, because they explain in more depth what students are expected to know and be able to do. So you're going to go ahead and, for your content area, figure out which aspects of the objectives are knowledge, which are reasoning, which are skill, and which are product. You may not have any product goals, or there may be some of these columns that remain empty, and that's all right. After you have deconstructed your standard, at that time you're going to write your learning targets. So, this learning target, explain how magnets interact with all things made of iron and other magnets to produce motion without touching them. That's not a student-friendly lesson level learning target. You want to break this down into learning targets that are appropriate for your students. Some of the standards, this one even has, even though it only has 2 clarifying objectives, I would probably just address, well, I might include both of these actually in this assignment, but some of your standards and have several clarifying objectives. If that is the case, you may want to pick 1 or 2 clarifying objectives to your standard, and then 1 or 2 clarifying objectives for this assignment. That's perfectly fine. So here you would write your specific learning target, what type of target it is, and then how will you assess that? And these different assessment methods, we'll be discussing them in chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8. And these are selected response, written response, personal communication, and performance assessment. So you want to decide the learning target, the type of learning target it is, and then the assessment method that you think will be the best for that. On part 4, you're going to be creating an assessment blueprint for your summative assessment. So you want to look at your learning targets and sort of group them together. In this particular standard, there's the understanding electrical charges and static electricity, and then there's sort of understanding the behavior of magnets. And those are sort of the two main things. There's some other stuff in there, but so you want to group the learning targets together and decide what is the big idea, what is the big learning goal that you're looking at. You're going to list the learning goals that you're going to be including on your summative assessment, how you're going to assess them, and like what percentage of items will focus on that. And in Chapter 4, they provide examples of assessment blueprints, and that will help you. So for your summative assessment, you want to decide, given your learning goals and given the objective and your content area, is it going to be better for you to do a performance assessment, or do you want to use more like a selected and written response assessment, like a written test? So you're going to want to choose one or the other of those for this particular assignment. In real life, you might include a combination thereof, but for this assignment, for your summative piece, decide, do you want, a written assessment with selected response and written response, or do you want a performance assessment? Okay, and then down here, you're going to include the assessment, the actual assessment, and that means all the items that you want to use, the scoring key or rubric that you're going to use, any directions that you would give to your students. So if you're doing a performance-based assessment, that usually means like a scenario or a task that you're going to ask the students to do, like if they have to create a model home or anything along those lines, and your directions for yourself, directions for the students, and your rubric. So that's part 4. And then part 5 is your formative assessment plan. So in backwards design, you want to think, okay, my summative assessment goals first. You want to think about those first, so then you can think about ways to formatively assess so that your students are prepared for that summative assessment. So you want to, for your formative assessment plan, you want to include a variety of assessment methods, and you want to explain whether or not they're formal or informal, and what kinds of questions or prompts you would use, and then what kinds of evidence you'll be looking for from your students. Finally, you're going to include your reference list, and then that's that.